Welcome back to another video in this series on deploying and managing applications using Massdriver. In the last video, we published our blog application. You can see it here on the canvas. It isn't deployed and running yet, and in order to deploy it, we're going to need to set up environment variables so that it's configured properly. Since our application is a WordPress blog site, we're going to be using the official WordPress Docker image. If you take a look at the documentation, you'll see that there's a list of environment variables. Most of the environment variables are around the database configuration, though there are some of them around auth. We'll deal with these auth ones in the next video where we look at secrets management. For now, just copy these database environment variables and then head to the massdriver.yaml for our blog application to set up environment variables. Here's the massdriver.yaml file. You'll notice that under the app block there's a section for environment variables, though for now it's empty. Let's delete these braces and the comments beneath it, and let's paste in the values that we copied from the image documentation. We need to clean this up so it's a set of key value pairs, and for now we'll just set it to empty strings. I'll fast forward through this. There was also an additional environment variable for debug mode that was just WordPress debug. We'll put this one in here as well. Now that we have the list, we need to set the proper values. Now, we don't really want to hard code these values. Instead, we'd like to set them dynamically based on the application configuration and connected bundles. Luckily, Massdriver supports that. Let's start with the first three environment variables, the database host, user, and password. All three of these fields are available in the MySQL database artifact. Let's jump back into the Massdriver console and take a look. If you hover your mouse over the MySQL artifact block, you'll see this window pop up. Open the artifact page by clicking the link at the top. This page shows you the artifact data for the MySQL database artifact. Technically, an artifact is just a JSON blob, so this page is really just a nice presentation layer of JSON. In fact, you can download the raw artifact and view it. You can see here, it's just a JSON blob. Set this aside for later because we're going to need it as a reference. For now, I'm going to close it. If we reveal the data, you'll see that the hostname, password, port, and username are all available in the artifact within this authentication block. Since this artifact is connected to our application, we can reference any of these fields to set the environment variables dynamically. Let's head back into the massdriver.yaml file to dynamically set the hostname, password, and username environment variables for the database. The ems block might look like a map of environment variable names to the string values, but that's only half correct. The key is the environment variable name, but the value is actually a JQ query to produce the value. If you're not familiar with JQ, it's a powerful JSON query language that can extract and manipulate JSON data. There's a wealth of reference material online, and Massdriver has a JQ cookbook on our doc site with many common examples you can check out. There's a link in the video description. To demonstrate how this works, let's start with the database host environment variable. All of the connection artifacts are available in a top-level connections block. We can reference it like this. Each artifact is nested under the connection name. In this case, the MySQL connection is named database. We can reference it like this. From here, it's just a mapping to the proper field in the artifact, which is data.authentication.hostname. Now the WordPress DB host environment variable will dynamically be set by the connection that comes in from the database. Let's copy this query and do the same thing for user and password. We just need to update the name of the field. User is username, and password is password. That's it. Those three environment variables will now be set based off of the MySQL database connection. Now that those are done, let's deal with the database name. This environment variable is a bit trickier since the database name isn't in the MySQL artifact. That's because the MySQL artifact has information about the database server, but not information about any databases on the server. That means that this field should be set as part of the application configuration. Let's update the application configuration to have an additional field for the database name. Scroll to the bottom of the Params block and you should see a commented out block name configuration. Here it is. This block allows you to extend the configuration of the bundle to add additional parameters that are specific to your application. Let's uncomment the block and rename the log level parameter to be database name. The syntax here is JSON schema, though it's in YAML form. Let's set the title to database name and give it a basic description. The type here is a string field, and we can even use regex to do field validation. Let's say that we only want this to be lowercase letters. Let's say the min length must be at least 2 characters, and the max length for a MySQL database name is actually 255 characters, so let's enforce it. The last thing we'll add is the MD immutable tag. This tag will make the field uneditable once it's been deployed. Now that we've added the new parameter, let's scroll back up and set the value of this parameter to the environment variable. Just like connections are nested under a top-level connections block, params are listed under a top-level params block. Then, if you remember, it was within a configuration block, and the field was database name. That's it. Now we can configure the database name as a part of our application config. For the WordPress table prefix, we could do the same thing we just did for the database name and add it as an additional parameter, but let's do something different. Let's say that we want to set this to a static string. Remember, the values here are JQ queries, so how can we use JQ to get a static string? Luckily, JQ has an @text keyword that will just return a string. So we can say @textblog, and this will just return the static string blog. So this is how you can hard-code environment variables if you need to. The last environment variable is this WordPress debug mode. This seems like something we want to set as a part of the application configuration. So let's scroll back down to the params block and do the same thing we did for the database name. We'll name this field debug, and we'll set a basic title and description. We'll set the type to a Boolean. Now let's go back to the top and we'll write the JQ syntax to extract the value. The JQ query here won't be as easy as the others. If you noticed in the docs, it said that any non-empty value will enable debug mode. That means that we need to use JQ to conditionally set this to a non-empty value when it's true and leave it empty when it's false. Luckily, JQ has a simple if-then-else statement. For example, we can say that if the value is set to true, then use the string 1. Otherwise, set it to an empty string, and then end the statement. All 6 of these environment variables are now being set dynamically based on either the connections or the application configuration. Let's save this file and lint these changes to make sure that they're good before we publish them. First, make sure that you're in the directory with the massdriver.yaml file, and we are. Now, let's run mass bundle lint. The linter will check the environment variables to make sure that the JQ query is valid. The configuration looks good, so let's publish it. Perfect. Now that it's published, let's head to the Massdriver console to take a look. Let's navigate to the project. Now, since all the changes we made today were to environment variables, we can't validate any of them until we deploy the application, which will be in a future video. What we can do is check to make sure the parameters we added are now a part of the application configuration. Click Configure and scroll to the bottom, and you'll see the database name is a string field and the debug mode is a Boolean. Looks great. In the next video, we'll look at how you can manage secrets using Massdriver and inject secrets into your applications as environment variables. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to stay up to date on all of our videos, and head to massdriver.cloud to get started today.